Beria. Part 2. Today we move to the second stage, the analysis of the accusations that emerged after Beria's arrest in the summer of 1953. Once Beria was arrested in the summer of 1953, a true avalanche of claims began to surround Lavrentiy Pavlovich. It was no longer just a political case. It became a whole system of allegations, rumors, and testimonies. Some of them were grounded in investigative materials. Others came from emotional recollections, and many were supported only by years of fear. We will gather everything that was said. We will examine the statements made after his removal from power. Stories about the nightly rides of the Black ZIS, the lists of women, testimonies about visits to the house on Malaya Nikitskaya, the accounts involving schoolgirls. We will compare them with investigative files, documents, memoirs, and later publications. We will not insist. We will not deny. We will simply show what is written in the protocols, what emerged later, and where the legend begins. And at the end, it is up to you to decide. Did Beria become a personification of the cruelty of his era? Or was he ultimately the main target of political retribution? Let us begin. Lavrentiy Beria before the arrest. March 1953. The 5th of March, Stalin dies. The country's leadership starts reshaping the system of power. Beria is appointed Minister of Internal Affairs of the USSR. In his hands, the police, the MGB, the counterintelligence services. He oversees the atomic project and holds control over a vast administrative machine. In the spring, his influence becomes colossal. In April, an amnesty is declared. Hundreds of thousands of prisoners are released from the camps. In May, the doctor's plot is officially dropped. The press writes with admiration, Beria, the reformer. He promises national concessions in the Union republics, softening of repression, modernization of the system. But the higher his power, the stronger the anxiety among his colleagues. Malenkov, Bulganin, Khrushchev see him as a rival. Conversations spread in the corridors. If we don't stop him now, tomorrow he'll become the new Stalin. On the 26th of June, 1953, everything changes. During a Presidium meeting, Beria is arrested. The operation is carried out by Marshal Moskalenko, Marshal Zhukov, and General Batisky. Beria is removed from the room and taken to Butyrka prison. The official statement is terse. Arrested for treason and conspiracy. Not a word about women, but within days, Moscow begins to buzz. The birth of the Black legend. Summer of 1953. Moscow turns into a giant loudspeaker of rumors. Everyone seems to know the story. Everyone shares the details. At first, a legend appears about the Black ZIS moving through the capital at night. They say Beria himself was inside. He would point at women on the street, and the guards would force them into the car. By morning, the vehicle was seen near the mansion on Malaya Nikitskaya. The girl, they insist, would step outside pale, but holding flowers and a box of chocolates. Then the names of actresses and singers start entering the rumors. Whispers mention performers of the Bolshoi Theater, young VGIK students, ballet dancers. Some claim the relations were voluntary. Others insist they were taken by force. Next come the stories involving the wives of influential men. Beria allegedly seduced the spouses of high-ranking officials, marshals, professors. This turns personal stories into political weaponry. Harming one's family becomes a legitimate motive for revenge. By August, tales involving schoolgirls emerge. This becomes the darkest element. Beria is no longer simply feared as a politician. He is demonized as a sexual predator. In September and October, the rumors grow more explicit. Stories circulate about a secret room with mirrors, special furnishings, and a hidden door. There are claims that lists of mistresses were discovered, with hundreds of names. Newspapers begin hinting at Beria's moral decay without presenting specific evidence. By December, public opinion is ready. The Black legend is formed. Beria is portrayed not only as an enemy of the party, but as a depraved man. On that wave, a closed trial begins, where the sexual allegations become part of the prosecutorial narrative. Versions of the accusations. By the time the closed trial began in December 1953, a full set of accusations had formed against Lavrentiy Beria. Each one became a brick in constructing the image of a monster the public was expected to hate. We will gather them all and later examine them against documents and testimony. Version 1. The Black ZIS. The most famous legend. They say that at night, a Black ZIS limousine with Beria's personal driver roamed the streets of Moscow. It would stop by the sidewalks, select women, and take them to the mansion on Malaya Nikitskaya. By morning, the women were allegedly released, with flowers and a box of chocolates in hand. This account became a symbol of fear, and even today, it is widely known by heart. Version 2. Actresses and singers. Rumors of relations with performers of the Bolshoi Theater, VGIK students, singers, and ballet dancers. Some claimed the meetings were voluntary. Others insisted coercion was involved. In certain retellings, specific names were mentioned, though officially they were rarely documented. This version reinforced Beria's image as a satirical libertine. Version 3. Wives of political and military figures. Stories of seducing the wives of marshals, professors, and officials. This version elevated the matter from personal scandal to political threat. It helped explain why the elite despised Beria and why the move against him was executed so swiftly. Version 4. Minors. The darkest version. It began circulating closer to December 1953. Rumors claimed that among Beria's victims were schoolgirls and extremely young women. This narrative finally transformed him into a figure of absolute monstrosity. Version 5. The room with mirrors. Some accounts described a special room inside the house on Malaya Nikitskaya. Mirrors on the walls, expensive linens, a secret door used to bring in guests. This detail gave the story a gothic, almost cinematic atmosphere. Version 6. The lists of mistresses. It was said that during a search, investigators found entire notebooks listing the names of mistresses. The lists were allegedly kept as Beria's private archive. Sometimes a number was cited, hundreds of women. This version served as evidence of a systematic hunt. Version 7. Testimonies of the security personnel. After the arrest, Beria's drivers and security staff were summoned for questioning. Their testimonies were included in the investigative materials. They claimed they brought women at his request. These statements became the primary documentary basis for the accusation of immorality. Interim conclusion. By the end of the year, Beria's image was constructed from these 7 versions. The Black ZIS, symbol of fear. Actresses and singers, symbol of depravity. Wives of powerful men, motive for personal revenge. Minors, transformation into pure villainy. The room with mirrors, the portrait of a pervert. The lists of mistresses, proof of systematic behavior. Security testimonies. The legal foundation. Documents versus the legend. Now that we have the complete set of versions, we will examine each one against the sources. We will review interrogation protocols, the indictment, property records, and the memoirs of those involved. Our goal is to separate fact from hearsay. The Black ZIS. This legend emerged immediately after the arrest in June 1953. Many residents of Moscow claimed they had seen the black car at night on the city streets. The driver was named Georgy Sukhanov. Security personnel allegedly acted under orders to bring women. What do the documents say? The vehicle logs of the Ministry of Internal Affairs contain preserved routes, but they relate to official trips. There is no mention of any special nighttime raids. The investigative case includes driver testimonies from August and September. They do confirm that they transported women, yet the details differ. Some describe voluntary trips, others hint at coercion. The interrogation protocols are dated after Beria's arrest. Historians believe pressure was exerted on the witnesses. Interim conclusion: the trips are documented, but there is no proof of abductions or violence. This version relies more on memoirs and urban legends than on verified evidence. Actresses and singers. The memoirs of Nikita Khrushchev and Anastas Mikoyan describe Beria as a man who hunted women. They claimed that among his victims were actresses, singers, and ballet dancers. Journalist Alexei Adyubey wrote about lists of performers allegedly found in the house on Malaya Nikitskaya. What the documents show. Prosecutor Rudenko's indictment uses the phrase numerous depraved acts. No names are mentioned. Investigative materials declassified in the 1990s contain no direct evidence of violence. Most references relate to voluntary visits. Interim conclusion: relations with performers were possible, considering Beria's position. But the allegation of mass abductions and coercion remains undocumented. Wives of party and military officials. Rumors of relationships with the wives of influential figures circulated even during Stalin's lifetime. Historians believe these relations amplified the hatred toward Beria among his colleagues. What the documents show. No statements from any specific wives appear in the investigative files. Neither the indictment nor the verdict lists any names. This version survives only through oral accounts and memoirs. Interim conclusion: the political motive for revenge is plausible, but there is no documentary confirmation of specific incidents. Minors. The most serious accusation. It appeared closer to December 1953. In his indictment, Prosecutor Rudenko did not specify the age of the victims, using the generalized wording, depraved acts. What the documents show. The final verdict does not include charges related to crimes against minors. There is no separate clause as required by the criminal code. Khrushchev's memoirs later amplified the topic, describing Beria's orgies with girls. But archival materials introduced into academic circulation at the end of the 20th century contain no concrete evidence involving underage persons. Interim conclusion: the version has enormous emotional impact, but lacks documentary foundation, or the evidence remains classified. The room with mirrors. Newspaper publications of the 1960s claimed that investigators had found a special room in Beria's mansion, with mirrors, luxurious bedding, and a hidden entrance. What the documents show. The property inventory compiled after the arrest survives only partially. It lists ordinary bedrooms, an office, and safes containing documents. There is no mention of a pleasure chamber in any official papers. Interim conclusion. This is most likely a literary addition, introduced later to reinforce the myth. Lists of mistresses. Investigators did confiscate Beria's notebooks in the mansion. They contained names, phone numbers, and addresses. This could have been a standard working index. What the documents show. The inventory confirms the seizure of notebooks, but does not refer to them as lists of mistresses. This interpretation appeared later in memoirs and journalistic writings. Interim conclusion: the notebooks did exist, but their purpose remains disputed. Testimony of security personnel. This is the most frequently cited section of the investigative file. Security staff described bringing women to Beria, outlining his daily routine and how they followed his orders. What the documents show. Almost all testimonies are dated between August and November 1953. That is, after Beria's arrest. Historians note typical signs of pressure, identical phrasing, repeated details. Interim conclusion: the testimonies exist, but their reliability is questionable. For investigators, they provided the foundation of the accusation. For historians, they remain the weakest part of the case. Chapter conclusion. Almost all versions rely on post-trial reinterpretations and memoirs. Documents confirm only the existence of personal relations and notebooks, but not systematic crimes. The key issue lies in the absence of official complaints or legal cases for each alleged victim. Beria was executed on political charges. The sexual allegations served as a moral verdict for society. Who needed a monster? After the arrest of Lavrentiy Beria in June 1953, the struggle for power did not end. It had only begun. The political landscape. At the top, Georgy Malenkov, the formal head of government. Next to him, Nikita Khrushchev, not yet the first, but already strengthening his position within the party. In the security bloc, Marshal Georgy Zhukov, recently returned from disgrace, and General Pavel Batysky. They carried out the operation to arrest Beria. This entire group needed one thing: justification of their actions before the country. The arrest and execution of the second most powerful man in the state could not be portrayed as mere power struggle. A moral sentence was required. They had to prove that Beria was not just a political rival, but an enemy of the people. A monster. Malenkov. For Malenkov, Beria was a direct competitor for the role of Stalin's successor. The alliance between them lasted only briefly. After the arrest, Malenkov fully supported the course toward Beria's complete destruction. He needed the portrait of an enemy, someone who threatened both the state and the personal safety of his colleagues. Khrushchev. Khrushchev acted with even greater foresight. He understood. To consolidate his own power, Beria had to be discredited not only politically, but morally. Thus, words like depravity, satir, and pervert entered the public campaign. It was under Khrushchev that the memoirs first mentioned the Black ZIS, the room of mirrors, the schoolgirls. These stories turned Beria into the embodiment of absolute evil, making any defense of him impossible. Zhukov. Marshal Zhukov was the military figure behind the operation. His task: present the arrest as the salvation of the motherland. In his memoirs, Zhukov writes that the country sighed with relief. For a military hero, it was necessary to show that removing Beria was an act of national rescue, not a bureaucratic maneuver. Thus, moral demonization reinforced Zhukov's image as a savior. Propaganda. Newspapers at the end of summer and autumn 1953 began publishing notes mentioning depraved acts. Details were scarce, but the emotional intensity left no room for doubt. Beria was transformed into a monster whose name could not be spoken without trembling. In the 60s, the campaign continued. Khrushchev's memoirs, journalist accounts, and publicistic writings repeated the stories of abductions and orgies. In the mass consciousness, They became accepted as fact despite the absence of documentary evidence. Effect. By the late 60s, Beria's image was fully demonized. He was no longer seen as a man, but as a symbol of evil, lust, and tyranny. This is how generations remembered him, without consulting the archives. Interim conclusion. The creation of the Black Legend was beneficial to every participant of the power struggle. For Malenkov, to eliminate a rival. For Khrushchev, to legitimize the new course. For Zhukov, to glorify the army as protector of the people. For the press and propaganda, to explain why a man once praised as a reformer was now declared an enemy. The image of a sexual predator became the perfect instrument. It destroyed Beria not only physically, but morally, erasing him forever from the ranks of potential heroes of history. The real man behind the legend. To understand who Lavrentiy Pavlovich Beria truly was, we must separate political propaganda from what is confirmed by documents. His life and career are not only the myth of the Black ZIS, but a reflection of an entire era of Soviet history. Early years and career rise. Lavrentiy Beria was born in March 1899 in the village of Merkuli, near Sukhumi. He studied at the Sukhumi Real School, then graduated from a technical institution in Baku. Ambitious and pragmatic from a young age, in the 1920s, he worked in the Cheka GPU in Transcaucasia. During this period, he gained the reputation of a harsh but effective operative. In 1938, at the height of the Great Terror, Stalin summoned him to Moscow. Beria became Deputy People's Commissar of Internal Affairs of the USSR. Soon after, the Commissar himself. He was tasked with halting the mass purges and stabilizing the internal security apparatus. Under him, the scale of repression decreased, though the terror did not fully cease. Role in the war and special operations. During the Great Patriotic War, Beria oversaw arms production, counterintelligence, SMERSH, and the deportations of peoples accused of collaboration. His decisions resulted in tragedies for the Chechens, Ingush, Crimean Tatars, and Kalmyks. These are severe pages of his biography, impossible to justify. Yet Beria was also responsible for the evacuation of industrial facilities in the war's early months. Millions of workers and hundreds of factories were relocated beyond the Urals, saving the country's defense industry. The atomic project. After the war, Stalin entrusted Beria with supervision of the atomic project. Under his control, reactors were built, laboratories established, raw material bases developed. In 1949, the USSR tested its first atomic bomb. This achievement made the country a nuclear power, altering the global balance of strength. Reforms after Stalin's death. In the spring of 1953, Beria initiated a large-scale amnesty. More than 1 million prisoners were released from the camps. Investigatory prisons were closed, national policy eased. The rehabilitation of the unjustly convicted was promised. These measures gained support from part of society and fear among his colleagues. Many believed Beria was consolidating power too quickly. Personal life. Documents confirm Beria had numerous affairs, but there is no direct proof of systematic violence or involvement with minors. Some historians believe the extent of these accusations was exaggerated by political propaganda. Crimes and responsibility. It must not be forgotten that Beria participated in the repressions of the 1930s. He signed execution orders, supervised deportations, and directed the state security apparatus. His career was part of the system that built the Gulag and suppressed dissent. These are real crimes. affecting millions. Interim conclusion. Lavrentiy Pavlovich Beria was a contradictory figure, a reformer and a ruthless administrator. He saved industry and led the atomic project, yet deported entire peoples. He may have been a womanizer, but the portrayal of a serial predator rests largely on rumors and the memoirs of his enemies. He was no angel. But the monstrous image shaped by propaganda does not represent the full truth. Finale. We have examined every version. We have looked into the documents. We have compared rumors, memoirs, and interrogation records. The image of Lavrentiy Beria turned out to be more complex than the frightening legend of the Black ZIS and alleged abductions. Yes, he was part of the machinery of repression. Yes, he bears responsibility for deportations and for signing execution orders. But the evidence turning his life into a chain of sexual crimes appears fragile. Most of these accusations surfaced only after his death, when the new leadership needed to justify why they eliminated one of their own. The story of Beria is the story of how power creates monsters. First, real ones. Then, symbolic. We do not absolve him of guilt. We simply show that truth is always more complex than a newspaper headline, and that the most dangerous thing is to believe those who shout the loudest about morality. Think of how many more monsters have been created by fear, and who Beria truly was. An executioner, a reformer, a victim, or merely a convenient instrument in someone else's game. If investigations like this matter to you, subscribe to the channel. What comes next goes even deeper. In the next part, we will not ask who Beria was in life, but how and why Beria disappeared after his arrest. When did it happen? Where did it happen? And was it even an arrest at all? What really took place that day? An execution or a carefully staged operation? Who pulled the trigger? Why were the protocols rewritten? And what vanished into the night when his body disappeared faster than his name? The answers in part 3, where biography ends and the silence of the archives begins.